Hello, friends, and welcome to episode 1075 of the Juicebox Podcast. Okay, so Kasey's been living with LADA for a couple of years. She's recently switched from MDI to Omnipod 5. We talked about gut health and that she may have gastroparesis. But there's a twist in this episode, and I'm going to let you get to it on your own. But I'll just say this. Kasey's father ruined my childhood and the childhood of millions of children living in Philadelphia. Wait till you find out how. While you're listening, please remember that nothing you hear on the Juicebox Podcast should be considered advice, medical or otherwise. Always consult a physician before making any changes to your healthcare plan or becoming bold with insulin. Would you like to save 40% off of sheets, towels, and other comfortable things? Go to CozyEarth.com and use the offer code JUICEBOX at checkout. When you make your first purchase of AG1 at drinkag1.com/juicebox, you'll get 5 free travel packs and a year's supply of vitamin D. And don't forget to check out the private Facebook group, Juicebox Podcast, Type 1 Diabetes. This one's not going to have any ads, but there will be, at the very end of the recording, information about how you could get started with BetterHelp if you're looking for online therapy. Last thing before we get going, if you're an Apple Podcast user, there's been a recent update to the operating system that may have changed your downloads and is stopping you from getting the podcast. Go to the show in Apple Podcasts. The settings you get to by touching the 3 little dots in the top right corner. Then you choose settings, go to downloads, touch automatic download, and choose all new episodes.
Hi, my name is Kasey, and I live in the Midwest, and I work as a content creator for a healthcare system. And I've been living with LADA for about a year and a half, almost 2 years now.
No kidding. Almost 2 years?
Yeah, almost 2 years. 2 years in August.
Kasey, I'm sorry to do this to you immediately, but I have to text Arden about her blood sugar very quickly.
That's fine.
It's a little lower than I am comfortable with it being.
Go for it.
Yeah. Hold on a second. She hasn't eaten anything recently. She was not particularly high before. I guess for context, since we're talking about it, her blood sugar is 50. It looks like the algorithm stopped it. And now, I guess to give people a little back room, I am going to check her location. All right, so she's in class. Is that right? Does anybody else stalk their kid with like, where's my iPhone and stuff like that? I do.
I'm sure my parents wish they could.
Yeah. Okay, so I see where she is. So so she's in class. I'm gonna just send her a text and be cool. Because, like I said, it looks like the algorithm, looks like Loop saw this coming about, no kidding, it looks like Loop saw this coming an hour ago and has been cutting her basal for almost an hour and 15 minutes.
And she's still on.
And it stopped, looks like it stopped here. Like I'm looking at the Dexcom graph, inferring from it, I don't think she's going to get any lower, but I'm going to get another reading in a minute. And now I'm walking the line between hassling her and making sure she's okay. So I sent a little text. I'm sure she's already done something about it. We had a conversation, she and I, this weekend where I said, hey, if I have to text you about your blood sugar, I said, and you don't answer, and then you don't answer again. I sent a third text. Could you not respond, stop?
Just let me know you got it.
Yeah. And she's like, well, I'm taking care of it and you're texting. And I was like, well, I don't know about that part of it because I'm here. Mm-hmm. And I was like, please try to put yourself in my position. To which she said, you should please try to put yourself in my position. And I said, well, I think I have. And then that was a rabbit hole I couldn't get out of because she's like, oh, you think you know what it's like to have diabetes? I'm like, no, I'm not saying that. I'm saying I'm trying to, I think I understand how it must feel to have your father checking on you like that. And I said, so I do understand, but you have to understand. And she kind of fought me for a minute. And I said, listen, try to imagine there's a thing in the world that you love and you're in charge of it not dying. And she's like, uh-huh. Okay, her blood sugar just jumped up like 10 points. So I think she's got this. Yeah. And she goes, okay. And I said, now, not only are you in charge of it, but you're the only one aware that it's happening. And she goes, well, I'm aware. And I'm like, unless you're already unconscious. And she goes, what? I said, imagine if all I had to do was call your roommate and it would stop a major medical problem from happening. And she's like, yeah. And I said, and I didn't do that. And then you died. What would I do? And she pauses and she goes, Dad, I just don't like you bugging me. And I was like, yeah, okay.
I can't give it to you.
Exactly. All she had to do was go, you make a good point. But she wouldn't give it to me. So, all right, I'm sorry. You live in the Midwest. LADA for 2 years. So how did you learn that you had LADA?
A little dramatically.
Oh, good.
I will say. So I had been misdiagnosed as type 2 back in 2018. Or that one's the one that was kind of dramatic. I went to the hospital for a adenoma growing out of my liver that started to bleed.
Oh my God.
And I had no idea what it's a benign liver tumor of that lots of people get. But most of the time they don't have symptoms. But mine burst randomly while I was out to dinner with my brother-in-law. So he took me to the hospital because I was like, I can't breathe, nauseous. And they were like, you're bleeding from your liver. And then they said, we're going to transfer you to another hospital that we would prefer, that handles all of our complicated cases. So while I was there and they stopped the bleeding, but I had all this like internal bleeding that had to resolve itself. So I was in the hospital like a week and they were checking my blood sugars the whole time. And they were always slightly over 100. And this was when I wasn't eating at all. Because after something like that, like I was not hungry, not eating. I just on lots of pain meds and stuff. So they're like, when you're discharged, you should see your primary care physician about your blood sugar numbers. So I said, okay. And I go see her like a month after I get out of the hospital to check them. And she checks my A1C, I think, too. And it was 10. So she was like, oh, okay. Like you're a type 2 diabetic. So I was treated as a type 2 diabetic for 3 years, taking metformin twice a day. And for a while that worked. I didn't have high blood sugars. But then somewhere around the end, like 2.5 years in or so, I had a surgery and started taking steroids after it for the recovery.
Okay.
And it was right after that, I know that's when I kind of took a break taking my blood sugars because my A1C had been like 5.5, 6 while I was being treated for type 2. So I was like, okay, this is all going great. Things are good. So I stopped I stopped finger pricking. I just kind of did what I normally do.
Yeah.
And then I had surgery and then I was taking steroids. So I was like, oh, I should probably check my blood sugars more now that I'm on steroids. And I didn't start right away, but towards the end of it, I started checking and I was like, oh, these are high numbers I'm seeing, higher than I'm used to seeing. But I was like, maybe it's just the steroids. So I kind of waited. I stopped taking them like after 3 weeks. And then I kept checking and the numbers were still like higher than I remember them ever being. So I reached out to I think also right around then I started losing weight. And
okay.
I lost like 20 pounds in a month. And at first I was like happy I was losing weight because I was like, woo, I could stand to lose some weight. But then after the quickness with which it was dropping was
Like,
weird.
it's alarming.
And
yeah.
Yeah, unusual. I don't lose weight like that. So I was like, okay, I better reach out to my doctors to be like, hey, my blood sugars have been higher than usual. And so I did. And they were like, oh, make a food journal. Let's see what you're eating. So I made a food journal. And meanwhile, I had some other doctors that I was sharing this info with, like in appointments. And I was telling them what my blood sugar numbers were, like 250, sometimes 300. And they were like, you should see an endocrinologist. They were like, that's too high.
Yeah.
So in the meantime, I made an appointment with an endocrinologist while I was talking to my primary care office about my numbers. And they were like, send this, take records for a few days. Like, the process felt long. And I was like, let me just make this endocrinology appointment in the meantime.
Yeah. While you are all talking, I'm going to go make sure I'm not going to die, if you don't mind.
Yeah. And the weight loss, just, I don't remember. I think I felt run down at the time. And so I got diagnosed after an ER visit, but I had seen the endocrinologist like the week before. And she said, and they tested my A1C, and she was like, it's 10. And I was like, that doesn't make any sense. Like,
yeah, because when I stopped paying attention to this, it was 5.5. So
yes. I was like 6.5, 5.5 the last time. And yeah, it's been like a year since I really paid it, but I was like, that there's no way. And she was like, well, there's a possible way. It's if you don't have type 2. So she's like, we're going to do the tests. And they did the test, but she's like, it takes like 2 weeks to come back.
Okay.
And she's like, but in the meantime, we're going to put you on long acting. So she gave me like 10 units of long acting to start taking every day.
Wow. Did you have I guess you found your meter too, huh?
Yeah.
You're like, I'm going to start doing that again. How much impact did just that 10 units of long acting have on your blood sugar?
Not a lot.
Okay. Yeah, I wouldn't imagine.
It was like not a lot. And so I was like, So I'm giving myself this, and it's not, my sugars are still pretty high. And then it was like maybe 4 or 5 days later, I had dinner. It was like fried chicken and fries. It was not long, maybe an hour or 2 hours after, I felt like I couldn't collect my thoughts properly. And like I was really out of it. And I was having trouble breathing. And so I took my blood sugar, and it was 450, maybe.
Do you think
I was like,
is that DKA, or is it just how you felt when your blood sugar got very high?
I think it was just how I felt when it got high, because I went to the hospital that night and they did not say I was in DKA.
Huh. I don't discount that at all. Just the altered feelings from very high or very low blood sugars they can be terrible. So yeah, that's interesting. But that did get you to the hospital. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh yeah. When I saw four, I was like, oh no. Well, actually, first I called my sister and I said, because her husband's dad is a diabetic, and I was like, I don't know if this is too high or if this is okay. Like, should I just stay here or should I go? And then she contacted her father-in-law, and she was like, he said you need to go to the hospital now. And so I was like, okay, I'll go to the hospital. They monitored me. They gave me fluids. They didn't even give me insulin. I had told them about how I was being investigated for not type 2, and they gave me like IV fluids and stuff, and it came down slowly. So at some point I got to 300, and they were like, okay, we're going to release you. Contact your endo when you get home and let her know what happened.
How long does it take you to get that endo appointment?
The first one didn't. Only took me maybe a month. The first one. And then after, they didn't tell me to go. They said contact her. So I literally reached out on my chart, and I was like, hey, I just went to the ER.
I see.
My blood sugar was this. And then she was like, okay, we're not going to wait for your results to come in. I'm starting you on fast acting. And the next day she had a script in for fast acting and was telling me.
When the blood work comes back, you have type 1 diabetes?
Yeah, or LADA. When the blood work came back, my glutamine acid, the GAD 65,
The GAD 65, yeah.
Was 9,900.
Yeah, so you have
and
that.
I never seen a number that high in a blood test. I was like,
I'm sure that's not right. Well, it just, I mean, LADA's so much about the onset and how slow it is, which is why you could get away with them treating you like a type 2 for so long in the beginning. And you didn't end up in the hospital sooner. But obviously something pushed you a little farther, and then there you were. So
yeah, I'm guessing it was the steroids that kind of pushed into it. But obviously, yes, I had problems, and I still had. And I probably, still, I don't know if that was my honeymoon, like those 3 years that I was like being treated like type 2, and it was seemingly okay until the
end. That's like my guess. Yeah. And then the liver growth and then it bursts, right? So you go through like a pretty major trauma that your body has to help with infection. Like I can see that being like how that kind of gets shoved the rest of the way. Do you go to, I mean, they give you insulin, but are you injecting it? Do they talk about a pump? Do you have this weird world where you feel like you're type 2? So all this seems really strange?
No. I mean, I think I accepted it pretty quickly because I had always been surprised by my type 2 diagnosis in a way. I felt like, because I knew other people who were type 2, and I also, since I work in a healthcare setting, I interview people who have type 2 sometimes for stories, and I see myself as like active, and I'm not thin. I'm definitely overweight, but like muscle, lots of muscle. Like I'm like you in that when you said lots of people can't guess your weight or think you're one weight and you're actually heavier. That was me. Like every time I went to the amusement park, I would play that game where they guess your weight because they were always 20 pounds under, 30 pounds sometimes.
Guess who's winning a stuffed animal today?
Yes. No one can ever guess my weight. So
funny you said that, because I used to do that all the time. I was like, go ahead, here's an easy one. I'll give you $1 and then I'll win something. Let's go.
So I was just like, I don't feel, how can I be type 2 already? I was just like, I'm 30. I think I was 37 when that happened. And I was like, I'm pretty active. It was hard to adjust to the type, but I did have diabetes in my family. So it wasn't a surprise.
There's type 2 in your family?
My grandpa had it, but I don't know if he was type 1 or type 2. I always assumed he was type 1.
Okay.
My mother tells me he was type 2, but I suspect.
How about other autoimmune stuff? Do you see that with anybody? Yeah, you're giggling. Yeah. What other stuff?
Oh, yeah. My family. Besides diabetes, vitiligo, sarcoidosis, lupus, cancer, lots of
stuff going on.
Yeah.
All right. So then it's not as big of a shift. So you were actually more like you. It's funny, you were talking about like I interview people, and you started talking. You said one thing, and I thought you were going to go the other way. I thought you were going to say like I don't hear myself in their stories about type 2 diabetes. And like, because I always find that like when people are learning about their illnesses or their troubles through other people's stories, you can almost learn as much about yourself by going, no, I don't have any of that. Like the thing that they're saying, I don't notice that. Like then you can go, well, that's probably not that then. But that's interesting. Just basically on the high level stuff that people think about type 2, you just didn't see. You didn't have any like fitting in with any of that stuff.
Maybe the symptoms or the way they would feel, I just thought, and I know it's a misconception, that like I would have to be heavier for that to happen.
Right.
Was my biggest thing. Like, because I would see people that were like twice my size who didn't have type 2. And that's where it would be confusing. Like, how can and they're twice my size, but they're pre-diabetic.
Yeah.
And they don't even have type 2. How can I have type 2?
I am not getting type 2 diabetes before her. Like, come on. Yeah, no, I understand. I understand
it. Yeah, so then when they said it's actually like this other type, I was like, well, now that makes so much more sense, because I felt like something was weird about me getting the type 2 diagnosis
Right.
at the size and activity level I was.
Well,
But I could relate to feeling bad a lot. I mean, it's been my entire life. I've struggled with health issues since I was a kid, in and out of hospitals. And
what other things? What were you struggling with?
well, growing up, allergies. I had an asthma. I had, and I didn't know I had the allergies till I got to college, and I went and got tested. But back then, when I was younger, every other month, I would get a sinus infection and an ear infection and bronchitis. And so the hospital felt like a second home, because I remember so many times waking up in the middle of the night, like I can't breathe. And my mom would take me to the hospital, and they'd give me a breathing treatment, and then they'd say, you have a sinus infection. And then they'd give us antibiotics, and then, things would clear up and I would breathe better and I would be okay. But it would happen literally every other month.
How about that? Okay. Yeah. That doesn't sound surprising either to me. When people say allergies related to their autoimmune, like I have autoimmune and I also have allergies, I always think, well, that's an autoimmune response to something that's over and above what it should. That's what an allergic reaction is, right? And that just makes sense. And then the infections. Do you feel better now since you have a diagnosis and you're using insulin?
Yeah, I definitely feel better in that I'm not as tired. I would have lots of issues with sleepiness before I got diagnosed. Like you talked about it in an earlier podcast about how you were the person that was like always sleeping before your like anemia stuff. And that was me for a very long time, from college on until my diagnosis. Like tired all the time, looking for nap opportunities every day. Some of my jobs that I had, I would, on my lunch break, like scarf down lunch so that I could take a nap for the second half of lunch and then go back to work. Because if I did not take a nap, I would risk falling asleep. Like while driving, I fell asleep twice while driving.
Oh, I've done that too. That's not a thing you usually tell people. I fell asleep in the left lane on I-95 in Pennsylvania and woke up in the right lane going into the shoulder.
And isn't that so terrifying?
Yeah. Yeah, it was really, and I was young, by the way, when that happened. So like in my early 20s. It just didn't make any sense. I'd only been awake for like an hour and a half in the morning. Like I should have been okay, Yeah. It's funny when you look back and you can see like, oh, this has been happening for a while. Sometimes you just kind of power through it. And sometimes it's just, you're so young. It's almost like you can make the best of it. I don't know if that's the right way to think of it or not, but
yeah, I became a big Red Bull drinker. As like the second time I fell asleep, I almost drifted into the oncoming lane when I woke up and then corrected myself. So that scared me enough to be like, okay, one, I need to see a doctor about how tired I am. And two, I'm going to start drinking Red Bull. So
it's going to get jacked up on caffeine. It's going to be fun.
And I'm going to make sure I nap after, because it was like lunch always did it. It was eating that always just made me so tired.
I wonder if it was your blood sugar a little bit, maybe. Your
now.
Right?
I don't know how long ago could I have had blood sugar issues, but now I suspect, it had something to do with maybe high blood sugar after eating, and then that's why I was getting so tired.
Well, that's really crazy. How do you manage today? What do? Do you still injections, or you have a pump?
So I just got a pump. I got the Omnipod 5 2 months ago.
Oh, cool. How do you like it?
So I love the convenience of it. I love that I feel less stressed giving myself than when I had to do injections, because I was doing like eight or nine injections a day to try and keep like the bumping and nudging and a lot to keep myself in a good range. And so just not having to do that many shots a day has been so nice. And I do feel like I have more, not calmness, but like I stress less about sleeping and going low. But I will say I got my A1C checked yesterday and I am higher than when I was MDI.
So you were so kind of like on top of it, like correcting you were probably correcting numbers that now the algorithm doesn't touch.
Maybe.
Did you hear my series about setting it up before you set it up?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, I did.
And that helped, but where are you having the problem? Is it after meals or is it with correcting blood sugars or where does it get you?
I think both. So it's like I feel like I go high and I just stay there a while. And I ask it like, do I need another bolus? And it'll say no based on my correction factor, but then it'll still stay high. So I guess I need to keep doing more work on adjusting my correction factor. Well, because it changes so often.
Yeah, but I was going to say, is it with every meal or is it with certain foods?
I feel like it's more certain times of the month. Like that's
hormonal.
There's definitely a lot of hormonal stuff involved. So like certain days, like I have a beautiful day and everything's perfect. And because my hormones are working great or overloading or whatever they're doing, like everything's, and then so it's figuring out when the fluctuations happen where things change and I need to up my settings. That's been a big challenge.
Yeah. Have you tried, sorry, I know we've known each other now for like 25 minutes, but do you have a period tracker?
Yeah. Oh, yes.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. You're tracking because if you track your blood sugars in your period tracker, it should only take you a month or two to figure out like these are the days. And then you're on an algorithm. So you have to get around it somehow. Like maybe you pick a percentage, 10, 20%. And if you, say you're having 10 carbs, call it 12 carbs. You're having 20 carbs, call it 24 carbs and stuff like that. And see if you can't find a balance in there that works in that window when you have a greater need for insulin.
Mm-hmm.
Could help.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it took a whole long time. I mean, when I was first diagnosed, like they gave me no info about how your hormones, a woman's hormones can affect. And so for the first 6 months, I mean, I was like, I didn't understand. So like why certain days things worked and certain days things didn't. And so now I definitely understand it a lot more, but still find myself having trouble figuring, okay, exactly 7 days before my period, I need to change it to this. Exactly 2 days after it ends, I need to change it to this. Exactly 10 days at that's what I'm trying to.
Yeah. And that's hard because it can go back and forth. It's not always 3 days or 2 days or, 5 or whatever. And sometimes you just see it happening and you go, okay, here it comes. And now I'll because you were doing it with MDI, right? Like because when you were seeing those rises before, you were giving yourself more insulin.
Yeah.
Yeah. But with the algorithm makes it feel like, oh, it's supposed to take care of it.
Yeah, so I feel like there are definitely times where I think less about it or check it less. And then I check it and then I'm like, oh, I've been at 200 for like 2 hours now. Mm-hmm. I had assumed the algorithm would have brought me down by now or in that time. And so that's where I feel like the algorithm is not bringing me down very well.
Yeah. None of them, listen, I think the truth is that none of them are going to just do that because your need changed. Like it's no different if you have like an influx of hormonal impact than if you decided to eat 20 carbs and not announce it to the device. Like it's the same thing. Like there's a thing pushing your blood sugar up that it's completely unaware of. Mm-hmm. And so it's like, well, because you said like on other weeks you have like real smooth going away from the hormones. So it says to itself like, look, I'm doing the thing I did last week and it worked fine. It's not working now. It doesn't just make the decision to give you more right away. And that's where you almost have to come in and like say, hey, look, there's more of a need here than you know about. There are some people with Omnipod 5 to say, like we'll make a manual correction, like just do what you would have done like before and then let it see that you need more insulin. There are people who say I throw it in a manual mode and push it down. I mean, the same thing happens with Arden with Loop. She has those times of the month and she uses overrides and extra insulin and all kinds of stuff to get on top of it. So it's not specific to one device.
Okay.
It's
Everyone's struggling.
Well, yeah, it's specific to the idea that you told the machine, that's pretty much still a pretty dumb machine. You told it, these are the numbers, and this is what you do when you see this many carbs. There's no like part of it that says, except on the third week of the month. Yeah. When this happens. And that's what you're fighting against.
And I asked my doctors, like, oh, can I set like different profiles to figure out what different times of the month? But they were like, oh no, with Omnipod, like it's doing that for you. So you don't, but you do need to like go in and manually change your ratios. So
you have to be careful. You have to be careful too, because there are settings in Omnipod that if you change them, you're changing them for the manual mode. That is not changing them for the auto mode. Because it's deciding. Like clear example, you set the pod up and you told it like, I need a unit an hour of basal. I need 24-day unit an hour. And it goes, okay. And then it puts it on, and then it starts making decisions automatically. It might be giving you 1.2 an hour in basal or 0.7. Like it might be doing something different. If you go back in and suddenly say, you know what, I want to make my basal 1.5 an hour, just trying to use big numbers, and put it back in auto, it's still going to say, I think she needs 0.7. But you have to be careful, because if you keep pushing those numbers up and suddenly swap it over into manual, you'll be using a lot more insulin if you turn them up. So yeah, be real clear about that. Go through the documentation clearly. Changing the settings doesn't change the algorithm. Changing the settings changes the manual settings.
Okay.
So if you feel like you just in general need more, some people end up doing a reset and being more aggressive up front with how much they tell it needs. There's a pretty good episode about resetting in the podcast somewhere.
Yeah, I know I started when my insulin needs were the least amount when the week I started. Yeah. And so, but then the doctors also told me it changes like every 3 days. Like the pod learns what you need based on every 3 days.
Yeah. I think legally they avoid the word learning, but but it's making decisions based on I think the pods that came just before it.
The previous.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's also, like you could end up seeing at the end of a period, for example, like if you had a really heavy need and it was keeping up with it, then all of a sudden the need dropped off, but the last pod had that need, you might even see a lower blood sugar in that scenario. So it is, it would be nice if everyone's bodies just did the same thing every day.
All the time.
How can we make that happen? That'd be wonderful. Yeah. But anyway, also I wanted to say, like, you've only been using it for 2 months too.
Yeah.
So you're still learning about it as well. But I would, just me personally, if you were Arden and you had a high blood sugar, I'd say to make a manual correction. Like that's what I would do. I would say, look, my blood sugar is 200. My correction ratio is blah, blah, blah. I'm going to put this insulin in. Hopefully the algorithm can stop it. If it can, I'll stop it with food, but I'm not going to stare at a high blood sugar like this. And then it will see your total daily insulin go up, and that will make it more aggressive.
Okay.
That makes sense?
Yeah, that does.
Cool. Nothing you hear on the Juicebox podcast should be considered advice, medical or otherwise. Always consult a physician before making any changes to your healthcare plan. Tell me what you do for a living. Why do you said you make content for a medical institution?
Yeah. So I work for a healthcare system of hospitals and healthcare facilities. And I am a video producer. So I do something very similar to what you do, in that I interview lots of patients about their diagnoses and their healthcare journey, and turn those into videos that help other people see how things work where we are. And it's really fun to get to talk to people, and you're hearing a lot of them talking about things that are, not the most pleasant, because they're talking about health stuff. And, they've all had major health conditions, but I think because of all the stuff I've gone through, I can relate to a lot of the things that they talk about. And, when I come to them or when they come to me, they're on the other side of a lot of it. And so it's talking about how the positive place they are in now versus where they started. So it's really fun to get to tell those stories. But I also my doctor says I sound like her medical students. Like I do a story with someone and I'm like, do I have that? Could I have that? So there's a little bit of my husband calls me a hypochondriac.
My finger bends in the middle too. Hold on a second.
I'm like, you're only a hypochondriac if nothing's wrong with you.
Right. Yeah, exactly. If you're right, then you're just a genius. So
like I have a reason to be worried about lots of things.
Do you actually see, like when they're talking, do you think, oh, I have that, or does it just make you nervous?
There are times I've wondered, do I have that? Like when I remember doing some stories on PAD, peripheral artery disease, and some of the symptoms they were describing about their legs. And now I'm like, it's probably a blood sugar issue slash like my anemia. But I would have like leg issues. Right. And I was like, could this be PAD? But then I got tested and found out I was anemic. And so I was like, oh, okay, the anemia is probably the reason for some of my leg symptoms, not PAD. Mm-hmm. But since I just did a story on PAD, I was like, maybe I have PAD. Who knows?
Starts going in that direction. You're like, well, this could definitely be it. I could definitely have this thing that I don't even know what that stands for. Because it's crazy. By the way, if I sound confused ever, your voice is very similar to my son's girlfriend's, and it throws me off once in a while.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm like, every once in a while, I'm like, that's not her. Just keep focused, Scott. Anyway. So you're almost like kind of making content for like your own ecosystem.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so do you deliver it to patients? Do you also interview doctors? Is it like, is it hospital wide, or do you go from like department to department? How do you handle all that?
Yeah, no, we, the content we make goes out on social media. It goes out to our employees, internal content, YouTube, web pages for the health system. So it goes in a lot of places. So yeah, I spend my time interviewing patients, doctors, anyone affiliated with the healthcare system about some type of story that is worth telling.
Yeah.
And so I feel like I'm the news team. I'm on the news team for the healthcare system. And it's like we're their personal news team covering all of the stories within the health system.
That's exactly how it struck me. It's like your own social media ecosystem for the system. And you get to, I mean, the value behind sharing stories with people. Like, okay, we joke that you're like, I have thrombosis, but you might not. But other people can hear that and go, I'll be damned, I do have that. And lead them to at least a checkup to find out. If not, you probably end up, it's a great way to reach people.
That's the goal.
Yeah.
Is for someone to listen to it and say, oh, that sounds like me. Maybe I should get that checked out.
Mm-hmm. Now, I can't tell you, like, I don't know that I can completely quantify how bowled over I am by how impactful the podcast is for people. Like, it's like it was a hope, but I just didn't realize there's something about this kind of medium and reaching people where they are, and they don't have to come to something or take a class, or it's on their time, or however you kind of like want to look at it. It's just valuable. It's the only word I can come up with. And I'm thrilled that it's being done like this. Have you been doing this a long time for them?
Yeah, 4 or 5 years now.
Wow. Well, that's really great. Yeah. Are you like a sound snob, or like when you hear me complain about noises, you're like, that's right, Scott, there should be no background noises whatsoever?
Well, I understand the struggle, because even in our studio, we have a door next door where it's like, oh, if that door slams in the middle of we have to tell people, can you back it up and just say that one more time?
Except you don't leave it in like I do. I'm like, just do it again. You just said something about your mom. Just go right back to it, please, because my wife can't keep that dog from barking. So
yeah,
it's hilarious. I have another question about this. Where did it just go? Damn it. Lawyers. Everything you make goes through lawyers?
No.
No. Wow, that's terrific. So you don't have to make content, ship it off to a lawyer, and then they come back and say at 23 seconds till 27 seconds.
No.
Oh.
Although I have heard that some people at health institutions do have to do that. And then, and then the legal's like, no, this, no, that. And no, we don't have to do that where I'm at. So I'm thankful.
That's terrific. It's interesting to see as time progresses, different entities get it. Like they finally understand. They're like, okay, yeah, every word doesn't have to be so precise. If we make them so precise, no one wants to hear. Most of the people I work with when I do stuff like that, they do get it. But back in the day, it was like, well, record it and give it to us. I'm like, I'm not doing that. Like, if you want to come on and do an interview, you can come on and do an interview, but you don't get to have it before it goes up. Like, it, you know, you know, like, oh, we said this thing here. There was one time. It's been such a long time now, but a gentleman came on to talk about a drug that was under development. And I put the episode up. It was terrific, by the way. It's a very popular episode, and the drug is actually really helpful to people and everything. I'm trying not to be too specific, but I put the episode up, and like 5 or 6 hours later, I get this email, and then it's a, can you speak on the phone? I get on the phone, and the guy's like, my lawyers are screaming at me about this thing I said. And I was like, oh, okay. I'm like, well, you know,
what was it?
What do we do? You know? And he's like, they're so afraid that the FDA and blah, blah, blah. And it was never a problem, but it was just,
okay.
I swear to you, it was like a SWAT team of people who went to school to be lawyers descended on me. I'm like, first of all, he said it. Secondly, I don't hear the difference between what he said and what you're saying right now. So, you know, like, maybe is everyone just trying to like make a job for themselves? Like, I couldn't tell exactly, you know, ended up being fine. But I was just wondering.
I mean, we do check everything. Like, well, you know, we've got the doctors checking it, marketing checking it. But we don't have to send it to legal. And we're very thankful for that.
Very cool. That's really wonderful. That's a very progressive idea, actually.
Yeah. I mean, we pump out stuff like, I think last time during the pandemic, it was 250 videos a year.
Wow.
On average, we were making. So it's like we're going way too fast for legal to check everything.
They're like, it must be okay. Like lawyers with contracts, they're just like, yeah, it's probably fine. Actually, you know how that just made me laugh? I put up this post today on Facebook. I was feeling whimsical. And I was like, here, I'm going to admit something. Then we can all admit something. It'll be fun to like share a secret. So I said, in 2013, I wrote a book about being a stay-at-home parent. And when people ask me how long it took to write the book, I tell them 6 months, which is mostly the truth. If you don't count the 60 days it took me to learn how to type before I started writing the book.
I saw that post.
Anyway, so then it's a cascade of people like saying embarrassing things about themselves. And then one person tells a story about an attorney in their office who kind of left somewhere on bad terms. I'm getting this a little right and a little wrong, but they went into contracts and put a bunch of dirty words into contracts that they used over and over again, knowing that no one would ever read them again. And it just, it tickled them to think that people's contracts would have like foul language in it. Made me laugh. One woman said she kicked her husband in the face during a sexual act. That's a great story. If you're not on the Facebook group, you definitely should be. Hilarious. Anyway, it's good times. But that just made me think of that for some reason about the lawyers and the contracts and everything. So
I saw that and I was trying to think of a funny story that I had, but I couldn't think of an appropriate one.
One person said, I cannot share this here if it's not anonymous. And I was like, I get you. I just think sometimes it's just helpful for people to just blow off some steam and be silly and stuff like that. So,
yeah.
Plus, look at the humble brag I did. I was like, I wrote a book. I found a way to be like, don't forget, I'm a published author.
Just fish that in there. Yeah.
I wasn't really doing that. I was really just trying to give it context. Like, how ridiculous is it? I was 40 years old, about 40 or 41 years old. I had made the agreement with the publisher. I'm like, yeah, I'll write this book. And then I'd never learned how to type. So I had to get one of those typing teacher programs and like go through kids like steps of like I learned to type with like a dinosaur in front of me being like, no, push the D. And I'm like, I'm trying. So anyway, Well, listen, I don't know why I'm not being hired for things like this at other healthcare systems. Why am I not interviewing people at healthcare systems?
You could, if you wanted to get a job in a healthcare system, I'm sure you could.
Kasey, I'm busy.
Because
I
they're
can't do it.
making podcasts, videos, all kinds of content.
Why are they not tapping me? By the way, I've heard, let me just, not you, Kasey, but other people. I've heard some of your content and it's garbage. And you could easily do with a person who can direct a conversation like me.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Watch me be petty for a second, but for humor, always for humor. This thing comes up. It's not important what it is. It's a doctor and somebody they work with and a person interviewing them. And the doctor comes on and says, the problem with this space, I'm going to be very vague, is that the information is boring and people can't absorb it because it's so boring. And then for about the next 10 minutes, the guy goes on to be so freaking boring and never and doesn't get to the point, right? Mm-hmm. Then says, and I'll stay vague. Then says, and I figured out what the answer is, and I'm going to give it to you without being boring. And I was like, my God, man, you've already spent 10 minutes. Like, I'm only
Too late.
Oh my God. Kasey, I'm only watching now because it's making me feel good about myself. I'm like, I am great at this. Like, this is terrible. And so, and then they go on to say something that I think, so it was around diabetes. I think I might have said this 10 years ago. And the guy says, we've just concluded a long study that says for sure, and then says something that 10 years ago, I was like, this is definitely real right here. And I was like, oh my God, how long have you been working on this? And it was not exactly a deep thing. It was like one of those things that when he said it, I went, yeah, duh.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we know that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And you bored the crap out of me while you were doing it, which just makes it hilarious. So now I'm watching it and I'm laughing. Just because of the ridiculousness of it. Like I'm, the problem is everything's boring. Then goes on to bore the tears out of you. And I'm giggling and my wife's like, we're in bed. It's late at night. Like she's doing her word thing. And I'm watching this and she's like, what's so funny? I was like, oh my God, I couldn't breathe. I was like, this is ridiculous. And I took the thing off and I played it back for her. My wife's a much nicer person than I am. Mm-hmm. And she's just like, but he's so boring. And I was like, no, I know, that's why it's funny. Then she didn't laugh.
About other people.
Then she didn't laugh. She's like, you're being mean to him. I'm like, he can't hear me. It's just you and me. It's not mean if he doesn't know. It's mean, Kasey, if later I tell it on a podcast, maybe. But anyway, I think I should be being hired by these hospitals. I'll talk to your people. We'll do a nice thing.
You could be. I'm sure you would be.
Yeah. Again, I'm busy. I can't do it. But what made you want to come on the podcast?
I could hear a lot of stuff that people would say that sounded a lot like me. So I guess that was part of it. Like, oh, I can relate so much. But also just like the frustration around, I had so many misdiagnoses in my lifetime. And so if I could help someone like figure something out or work through something at all, it's nice to feel like you're giving back after you have kind of come to the place where you need to be. And it took me a long time to get there. And with a lot of missteps. I was diagnosed with narcolepsy, besides type 2.
Didn't have that.
No, didn't have that. Right. And I think it was all, again, blood sugar related. Yeah. I was passing out all the time and I would just like go to sleep so quickly. And I would have these instances where my body they called it cataplexy, where my body would, like, I just couldn't control it. I couldn't hold myself up. I would spasm. And I think now maybe could have been low blood sugar.
Oh, wow. I'm looking at it. Yeah. Like it's kind of a collapsing of your body, huh?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, goodness.
And I would spin out, like I would get into a fight with my mom. I remember that would trigger it a bunch. Like I would be arguing or something. And then I would be like, I can't, like I had to have to lie down and I I would just have to lie there and my body would just like seize every like 30 seconds or something for and maybe an hour or two, and then I'd feel okay, and then I'd be able to like go to bed, go to sleep, and then the next day feel fine. Or like we'd be out shopping, and it's a long day, and my legs would feel like jello, and I would be like, I can't walk. Like I literally need to hold on to something to walk.
Yeah.
And so that's what we were thinking was cataplexy. But now I wonder, was it low blood sugar?
I mean, just from the visuals I found online about it, it certainly seems like your body just, like a marionette that somebody pulls the strings like loose on. You just kind of collapse. Yeah. Oh, that's crazy.
And then when I finally started to figure it out, apple juice, like I was and it happened. I was like, my legs are weak. I can't, and I was like, go get me apple juice. And then he did. And 20 minutes later, I was like, oh, I feel great. I feel fine.
Yeah. Hey, in your late 30s, why the heck are you arguing with your mom? That's the only thing I was like, I'm like, that's my only follow-up question. Like, what do you?
Oh, my mom's a lot. She's great, but yeah, lots of high expectations.
I see. I'm like, Kasey's 37 arguing with her mom. Ask about that. That's what I want to know about. High expectations.
Yes. No, she's one of those people, just like, the people who tell you to have cinnamon for your diabetes. Like she's kind of one of those.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So we get it. Yeah. So we get in arguments a lot, or we used to get in arguments a lot over health stuff.
Yeah.
Especially. So
I prayed for you today and I bought okra. Great, Mom. Thanks.
Yeah. Did you take that supplement I sent you? Like, and so, it just.
Yeah. No, I know. Unless Jesus is going to come with a time machine, it's not going to help me a lot.
Yeah.
Appreciate your input, though. You're making me think that we're just starting pretty soon. Jenny and I are going to start a Mythbusters series about diabetes, where we're going to just we're going to talk about the funniest things that you hear about diabetes and kind of.
Oh, that's a good one.
Break them down and stuff like that. It was actually a listener's idea. I was like, that's such a good idea. Then I walked away. I was like, why did I not think of that first? But I was like, I'm stealing that. Is that okay? And they're like, yeah, sure. I was like, well, I'm doing it. Okay. Do you have people in your family that are helping? Like you said, you're married. I heard you say that a couple of times. So I'm always interested in that. Like, you're diagnosed as an adult. Do you go back to a loved one and say, I need help with this? Or do you kind of turtle up and take care of it on your own? Is there somewhere in the middle?
Yeah, I mean, I think I took a lot of it on myself in general, just because I don't know. I guess my husband likes to say that I should have gone to med school. That he's like, you just want to be a doctor, and so I think I shouldered a lot of it myself because I could figure it out and understand it and work on it myself, and I didn't necessarily expect him to do all that, but he did. I did have him learn how to give me shots.
Okay. So
like sometimes he would do my insulin if I wanted to do it like in the back, like on my butt or something, or like the back of my arm, I would have him. So that was really great. He'll give me a shot if I don't want to do it or it's a hard to reach place. And then he follows me on Dexcom, although we need to figure there's some kind of Dexcom issue that we're still working through, but he can generally see me on Dexcom. But yeah, so I don't ask him to do a lot, but he is a participant and he gets to hear me talk about it all the time.
Yeah. And again, as a guy, all I heard was like he figured out how to get the back of your pants down using the diabetes. It's really all I heard. I was like, oh, he's like, oh, I can see your butt extra. Sure, I'll learn about this. Why not?
He must be disappointed when it's the arm ones that I asked for.
Hey, I need a shot. He comes running out of the room. He's like, oh, finally is my time. This is great. And then you're like, here, right in my arm. You're like, wow, this is a waste. I can see your arm regular across the room. What the heck? That's nice, though. Like, I mean, so enough involvement that he has some comfort and you have some comfort, but he's not a overseer and he's not a caregiver for you.
Yeah.
I think that's reasonable. I think that sounds like a good mix, honestly.
Yeah, it's been working well for us.
Did you have the "this is how my glucagon works" talk?
Yeah, and he saw me use it. I've used it once.
Really?
Since, yeah.
Which one did you have?
You mean glucagon or I don't know how to say it, Basquimi?
Yeah, Gvoke, or is it Basquimi?
Oh, okay. Yeah. Gvoke. I have Gvoke.
Oh, okay. And you used it. So you were like, uh-oh, it's happening. I'm using this.
Yeah, there was one day I was MDI still, and like my blood sugar was it had got to 40. And I had been for 20, 30 minutes. I had eaten 20, 30 minutes before, like taking stuff. And I was just like, I'm so full. I can't physically put any more in my body, and it's not coming up. So I was like, okay, I think this is the time. So my husband was lying. I mean, I was like lying on the bed, and I was like, I feel so horrible, but it's not coming up. And I was like, I think I just need to do it. So I did it, and it did come up, but even then it still took like 15 minutes to come up.
Wow, you were really in a situation. Do you think
I don't even remember how I got there.
Yeah.
Like
really?
I was like, how did it get that? But somehow it did. I mean, nighttime can always be tricky with me. Like, I feel like if I'm going to go low, it's at night. So
but you're not seeing, well, are you not seeing as much of that with the algorithm, or are you just less scared of it? Because you said earlier you were less scared, but.
Yeah, no, I'm not seeing as much. Or if I go low, I can drink some like glucose juice and come out of it. Yeah, pretty quickly. So I haven't had like a stubborn low like I did that time.
Interesting. Well, that's good. Listen, I'm glad you had it, and it was helpful for you. You've said a couple of things over the last hour that make me feel like you actually listened to this podcast. So how did you find it?
So I used to work in TV news, and one of the anchors that I worked with has a daughter who has type 1, and she had always posted about stuff. And when I got diagnosed, I reached out to her to kind of be like, hey, I saw that, because I didn't know a lot of people, but I saw that you have a daughter with type 1. Like, I just got diagnosed with LADA. If you have any suggestions or anything I should check out, let me know. And she was the one who told me, check out the Juicebox podcast.
Oh, that's cool.
And I didn't do it right away. It took me a good 4 months maybe, because I think just when I was diagnosed, like, there was so much stuff that changed all overnight that like I couldn't handle like listening. I needed to just like find a balance with what I'd been told so far and get a handle on that before I was like ready to like, but I'm so glad I did, because there were so many things I was doing wrong. Oh my goodness. And all of these things that had happened that I didn't understand, the episodes on the factors that affect your blood sugar, like just figuring out a lot of those made such a big difference. And so it was just life-changing because this wasn't stuff we were talking about in the doctor's office.
Sure.
And so I feel like I got a lot better handle on how to manage it from listening to the podcast, for sure. But it took me some time to get there.
Yeah, I think that makes sense, honestly. Like, I mean, I can't imagine, like, just put it into another situation. Like, you know, you just found out you have something, it doesn't go away. And then and you're like, you reach out to somebody, like, do you have any advice? You're like, listen to a podcast. You're like, wait, what? Like, no. I'm not doing that. I don't even have enough
time. Add it to my list.
Yeah.
Add it to my list of things.
I have enough time for my true crime podcast, which I, by the way, really want to listen to. And, you know, it's interesting because I can get caught. I try very hard not to get caught on one side of this conversation, because it happens to me sometimes. Like, I'm the one who makes it. I know what it can do for people. I've seen the feedback come for years and everything. And you see somebody who's like, I don't have time to listen to a podcast. And there's like the part of me that makes it is like, come on. Like, like, what am I going to do? Like, I got you all the way to the water. I can't get you to drink it. Like, like it's because it's hard to find people, get them to believe like, okay, this podcast might be worth listening to, then to listen long enough. Like, what if you fall on one of the episodes where I'm an ass? You don't know. You know what I mean? Like
you have to be in a receptive mode.
Right. Yeah. You just have to be ready for it. But it's, and that makes complete sense to me. On my side of it, I can sometimes in my own head be like, just listen to it. Like I never say that out loud, but when somebody comes to me online, they're like, I don't have enough, like they ask a question about like, hey, I'm super low every day. And I'm like, yeah, here's 10 episodes. It's right in the middle of the pro tip series. That'll help you. Like, I don't have time for that. And I'm like, well, like I come to your house, like, like you want me to do it? Like, I don't know. Like I already wrote it down. It's right there, but I take the point, and I'm amazed that many people get over that hump and actually do it. But I guess it's probably eventually because someone gave you the recommendation, right? Like you think like I asked them and they said this, they wouldn't have just said it for no reason.
Well, I feel like it was because I wasn't seeing good enough results myself. Like I was like, okay, I've been at this for this long and my numbers are still not what I want. And I'm still having trouble. And so I was like, okay, I've taken in all the stuff the doctor said. Okay. And I've been putting it to use and it's only working so well. So I was like, now I'm ready to like hear some more stuff to try and incorporate and get things lower.
It makes sense. Like you want to level up.
Yeah.
Yeah. You're like, well, let me see if I can figure out a little more. That's terrific. Yeah. Were you thwarted at all? Like, or put off by the fact that I don't have diabetes?
No. Okay. No, because once I, heard your background and it's obvious how knowledgeable you are. So I was okay that you're a quote unquote layman from a having diabetes perspective. But as I read and see so many of the parents, having to figure out so many things for their children. And so, yeah.
So
that's a lot.
You have an anemia diagnosis too. Mm-hmm. Is that a food absorption thing, or do you think that's a bleeding thing? Do you know where that came from?
No, I don't know. And so I'm thinking, here's what I'm thinking. I'm thinking the gastroparesis that I'm hearing a lot of episodes mention, that might be me, because I've definitely had trouble with, especially during lows. Like if I've eaten and I have a low, say an hour later, like trying to put more into me really hard. And oftentimes I will throw up reflexively, like I'm too full. And so that was always a bit of a struggle managing those, was like trying to put food into me when I'm already full or really full. Mm-hmm. And I
just can't
and then I throw it up because my stomach's like, no more. And then I would get like x-rays and they would be like, don't eat 3 hours before. And I wouldn't. And they'd be like, we see food in your stomach. Did you eat? And I was like, no, I haven't eaten for 3 hours. Like you said, like, okay, next time don't eat for 4 hours. And then I don't eat for 4 hours. And then they're like, we see food in your stomach. I'm like, I don't know what to do. You told me not to eat I didn't. I probably need to see a GI.
Before you go take that step, did you listen to the episode about Arden's like digestion? It's called
yes.
Just try a digestive enzyme at every meal for a week and a half. And you'll if you don't, you might see things move through you more quickly, more efficiently, and your insulin work more the way you expect it to. And if that's the case, then you're like, that's the other thing that, like, it's the one thing we don't talk a lot about. Like people are like, oh, your pancreas, all its job is insulin. It doesn't do that anymore. Your pancreas helps with your digestion too. Mm-hmm. And for I think a lot of people with autoimmune diabetes, they're seeing slow or poor digestion, and they can get in that space where they're like, oh, it's gastroparesis, but in the more, in the diabetic, parlance of the word. And so, it's such an easy way to try just to see if that helps you. So
yeah, and I got her digestive enzymes. So
oh my God, you did? You haven't taken them?
Well, okay.
Kasey, stop.
So I know it's so hard. My iron pills, all the pills, it's so hard. And so I do sometimes remember. It's like remembering and doing it consistently.
I'm going to get your mom to yell at you about this, I think. Can you imagine? I'm exactly her now. I'm like, take those pills I got you from the health food store.
Yes. Yes.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
Yes, she does send me supplements.
I'll tell you, that's what made it so hard to talk about a little bit, because you do feel like even the lady who helped me at the health food store the first time, I was like, I don't think this lady shaved her underarms in 10 years. And she smells like patchouli oil. And like, what is it, 1976 in here? Like, what am I doing? But man, she knew what she was talking about, you know? So what the hell? Yeah. I mean, if you have them, take them, for God's sakes, please.
And somewhere along the way, so I was also diagnosed with lupus in my early 20s. And when that happened, I went to see a holistic doctor who it felt like was not a quack kind of doctor. And so one of the things, like, she said, you have autoimmune, you have this autoimmune diagnosis. And the big thing that I did do that she said was like, stop drinking milk. Like, she's like, milk, for a lot of people, every time you drink milk, like a cell in your gut bleeds. And we're just lactose intolerance is very high among especially minorities.
Okay. So
I did stop drinking milk around that time. And then she also was like, she gave me like 7 supplements. You need to be taking CoQ10. You need to be taking it was a bunch of things. And I did find that I felt better when I would do that, but it was also like a lot to keep up with. And so eventually I kind of, but every once in a while I go back.
And sometimes it's hard when you're in an office and somebody's like, you should try this. We sell them. You're like, uh-oh. All right. I see. I got you.
I take too much already. It's hard to keep up with all the things I need to do.
Yeah. I mean, I can just tell you from a very basic perspective, Arden had trouble with digestion. Her stomach hurt, and, her insulin was working all kinds of weird ways. And, you're just like, no, this doesn't seem right. And it kind of came out of nowhere. And it felt like it came out of nowhere. But then you stop thinking about it and you're like, God, her stomach's always hurt. Like, and not always, but since the diabetes, but she's been so young since she was diagnosed. Like, how would we know the difference? And it's just such a simple little, like, screw to turn just to see, and you don't have to do it for long to see if you're getting like value from it either. So as long as you're pooping and you're taking that, like, cause you don't want to be backed up. But if you're taking those things and it's coming out the other side the way you expect, you'll know if it's helping you in pretty short order.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. Jeez, I can't believe this. I don't, it's late in the afternoon. I don't want to be somebody's parent today.
Oh, the other fun thing that I haven't mentioned yet is that my best friend growing up also got diagnosed with LADA.
Real? Like, as an adult?
Yeah.
You guys live near a power line or something? What was going on there?
No, I was like, I want to reach out to everyone from high school and be like, were you diagnosed with LADA?
Hey, did you have the well water too?
Because I was like, oh my God, like we've been best friends since like 6th grade.
Huh.
And she was diagnosed a few years before me, but hers is like, I don't know, less severe. Like, she only takes long acting. She doesn't need short acting.
Yet.
Yeah. And when I was diagnosed, it was like, oh, you need all the things. So, but like, she gave me my insulin shots at my wedding. So it's nice that I have someone close who knows the struggle too.
Yeah. No, that must be lovely, actually. Do you talk a lot about it?
Not a lot, because we're in our 40s and we're busy, and so we only connect every once a month maybe. But when we do usually ask her, oh, how's it going with the diabetes, or I'll tell her about what my new thing is that I'm doing, like Omnipod, next time I chat with her. And yeah. And then I also found out the guy I had a crush on in high school also had type 1, and I had no idea.
maybe you're the problem. You might be patient zero.
All these people.
Are you doing this to people, Kasey? Are you giving people diabetes?
Because I posted about it on Facebook when I got it, and then he reached out and I was like, I had no idea you had diabetes at all.
Did he know you liked him?
He hit it well. Yeah, oh yeah, I had a crush on him for years in high school.
But he knew it, but you guys didn't date?
Oh no.
Oh, okay. Hold on, just for fun. Why not?
Oh well, I mean, I had a boyfriend at one point in high school, and then I was too shy to say anything, and I don't think he liked me. So, we're just Facebook friends now that we're old, like, because we went to the same high school. We were both on the track team together, and that's how I formed a crush. But I was never going to tell anyone I had a crush on that I had a crush on them. But
you believe he knew?
Oh no, he didn't know.
Oh, he doesn't know. Oh, this is fantastic.
Oh no.
Oh, I love this. I don't know why. I don't know why that's so good to me. For some
No, I've never told him that. That way back when I have. But he reached out when he saw my post to be like, "Oh, I've been living with type 1 since I was little."
Tell me.
And I was like, I had no idea.
Yeah, but tell me, you're married and you're 40 now.
Oh, yeah.
When he reaches out to say, "Oh my God, I have type 1 too," was there a little bit of you like, "Oh my God, it's the guy from track"? He still knows me.
Yeah, no, I mean, it was like, oh wow. No, and it was this thing. It's something in. So I grew up always thinking about him. That he's had there was a profound sadness.
Really?
Yeah, that he had, and I didn't know where it came from. But I wonder now that he said, "Oh, I've had type 1 since I was a kid." I wonder if that was part of it.
Kasey, were you trying to save that boy? Was that? Were you like, "Oh, no. I could help him"?
Probably. That's like my personality. So,
Trust me, you'd be sending him supplements if he would have said yes. That's hilarious. Oh my God. Well, that's really interesting, isn't it? That I don't know why I find that so just interesting. It makes me think of every pretty girl I went to school with. And then you're just like, oh, I remember everybody loved that girl. And or that guy, every girl was looking for that guy or vice versa, whatever. And then you see them now as adults and some of them you're like, I get it. I still get it, And then some of them you're like, ooh, whoops.
What was I thinking?
Used it all up early, did you?
Oh yeah. I was the girl that had a crush on everybody, literally everybody. So okay. I was non-discriminate.
Just didn't matter. I see the good in all. That's fantastic. You said you just got married. Is that your first marriage?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
You waited on purpose, looking for the right guy?
Yeah, dated a lot, but just hadn't found the right one. And then we were best friends for 3 years. Mm-hmm. And then he asked me on a trip and we went, and the rest is history.
Yeah. If you could afford vacations, I'm in. That's good. That's what I would be thinking. I'd be like, a trip. Goddamn right. Let's go. But I applaud the waiting. I like that. I like the don't just marry the first person who stops in front of you.
Oh, no. Yeah, no.
Feeling. That's very cool. Is there anything we haven't talked about that we should have?
No.
No?
Probably not. I don't think so. I mean, there's lots more that I could talk about, but but nothing that needs to be talked about.
Well, need and want are the same thing. I don't want to. I just don't want to miss anything because it's your story, and I want to make sure that somewhere in between you telling your story and me being silly that we get to the things that are important to you, and me telling stories about people being boring on YouTube and how delighted I was by it. I mean, it's a real look into my illness. But I have to go back and tell you again, when he said the problem is it's boring, and then he went on to be boring. I don't know, if you know everything you need to know about me. I giggled for 10 minutes while it was happening. It's just I'm like, oh my God, it's still happening. My wife's like, shut up. I'm like, no, wait, he's still boring the crap out of me. Probably such a lovely person. I feel,
yeah. No, I love people. They don't know.
It's hard to do this.
Yeah.
Do you, the thing you do at work, is it scripted or are you driving it? Or do you let
No,
them talk and then edit around their?
yeah, that's what it's like. We have some general questions, but we just let them talk, and then once we get the transcript, then we kind of start piecing it together and figuring out how do we tell this
Mhm.
how do we tell this story.
So
Yeah.
more like a PBS style podcast feeling.
Yeah, kind of.
Yeah.
But also, there's time constraints. Like, I'm like, oh, you got to tell it in 5 minutes or less. So
Wow. No, that's not
not
easy.
too PBS.
I did one of those podcasts once. It was for a UK podcast, and they wanted to interview me. It was about it was a parenting thing. Like, oddly enough, all the things I'm ever interviewed about have nothing to do with diabetes. It's always very, So they're like, they sit down and we have these long conversations. It must have gone on for a half an hour. The person would ask a question. I'd pontificate, but it went back and forth. And then I heard it, and I don't know that I didn't talk for maybe 25 seconds. But they somehow picked out the exact thing they needed to put in that exact space. And I was like, wow, that's a skill. That's an editing skill, because I, as you can all probably imagine, just talked forever, and not just, and I'm not like direct. I tell stories to make points and, like all this stuff, but they loved it. They were like, this is exactly what we need. And I was like, okay. But then they didn't need more than 20 seconds here and 10 seconds there and stuff like that. It's interesting how they did it.
Oh, yeah. No, we always get way more. I mean, I just did an interview a couple weeks ago. It was an hour long interview, and I have to edit it down to 5 minutes or less. Yeah.
Yeah. When my book came out, it's so funny. I'm now mentioning this twice and I don't mean to. I got, I don't know, people wouldn't know this, but if you're not famous, and I am certainly not, if you're not famous and you write a book, your publisher doesn't really help you sell the book very much. I know that sounds strange, but they don't. And so I got myself some media, and that media led to Katie Couric's online producer reaching out to me. I'm in this studio in New York City. It's actually where they do the CBS News, I think, is where we shot it. But the news wasn't until later in the day. So everything's kind of pushed off. It's so cool. Like the news stage is just pushed off into a corner, and they're shooting this web show. But at the same time, there are 20 or 30 desks of people who work for CBS who are literally just doing their job in that space.
Yeah.
And it was going to be, this gentleman was going to get interviewed. I forget about what. And then it was me. So I was kind of in the wings while he was doing it. And I have to give this guy like a ton of credit for a lot of my life, even though I don't know who he is. And he didn't really do it on purpose. But he gave this very competent interview that when it ended, I thought, well, that's so forgettable. I'm not going to be forgettable when I talk to Miss Couric in a second.
Okay.
And so the next thing I know, I'm up there telling stories about this time my wife and I were having sex in a field, and a commuter train went by really slow and everyone could see us. And I told big, stupid stories. Like, she's like, so you're an author. She tries to bring it back, and I'm like, oh my God, yeah, I got a book signing. And she's like, you had a book signing? I'm like, in my hometown. I was so excited. My wife stayed home that day to help me because the book signing was in the afternoon. Got the kids off to school, and I came back into the bedroom, and I was like, this seems like the kind of day a guy like me would get to have sex, right? Because like I wrote a book and I got a book signing, and Katie Couric is looking at me like, what in the hell are we doing? And I'm like, so anyway, Katie, I jump into bed. I'm very exuberant and excited, but I think I hit my wife's nipple by mistake, kind of pinch it to the bed. You know what I'm talking about. And I'm telling this big, right? This big, dumb story. And she's laughing. And everyone working in the desks is laughing. The guy running the camera's laughing. The producer's laughing. And I am just like, this is why famous people are crazy. I'm like, I feel terrific about like how I'm manipulating these people's like life, and they're laughing and everything. Anyway, it gets all done. She's like telling me stories afterwards. By the way, I'm going to say this right here. I've never said it before. What a dirty mouth on a lady. I love Katie Couric. You'd have no idea by watching her on TV. She is hilarious, right? So we're talking afterwards and everything. And about a week later, I get this note from her producer, and she's like, hey, the thing's up now. And I go and look at it, and it's like 4 minutes long, and none of my stories are in there. And I got back to her, and I'm like, I'm so sorry. Did I let you down? She goes, oh, are you kidding me? She goes, that video is famous in this building. She's like, we are all watching it on our computers. She's like, it's never going to make it into the thing, though. She goes,
yeah, we can't use it, but we can watch it.
She's like, but it's terrific. Thank you. And I'm like, okay. But then, a couple of weeks later, they called me back and actually had me on our television show. They were in a meeting and they said, we should get that guy back from that thing. Actually, Katie Couric said that in a meeting. She said, why? This is a quote. The girl's like, I wrote it down for you. She said, I was just in a meeting with Katie. And she said, why are we not getting Scott Benner for this?
Oh, hey.
And I was like, see, they didn't ask for the other guy because he was competent and boring.
Yeah, you were memorable.
I was like, let me tell you, Katie, about this time. She's just looking at me like, is this not about parenting? And I'm like, not anymore, honey. I'm here. Let's go. Anyway.
You're going to go in all kinds of directions.
If it wasn't for that guy going before me, I would have done the same thing he did.
Okay.
Swear to God, I was all ready. I would have gone up there and gave her dry answers to canned questions, and it would have been forgettable. And
we do like colorful stuff.
Yeah. And then she doesn't invite me back. And then the time she invites me back is when she pulls me aside after it's over and she says, you're so good at talking to people. And that's what made me make a podcast.
And that's also part of why I wanted to come on the podcast. Besides the helping people, I was like, it'd be really cool to talk to Scott.
Oh, that's lovely. You're too nice. Was it cool?
Yes, of course.
Of course. Don't say of course. You don't think I botch a couple of these once in a while? Could have been yours. I was just last night texting with Isabel, who helps me with the Facebook group and other things. And one of the things I texted her, I was like, hey, have I ever told this story on the podcast? This is a really good story and I want to tell this. She goes, you've told that on the podcast. I'm like, are you kidding me? And she goes, yeah. I'm like, are you sure? She goes, you absolutely have told this one. I was like, what about this one? And she goes, you've never said that. I'm like, well, I'm going to say that one day. She's like, what is this story about? And I said, oh, you'll have to hear it on the podcast. I'm like, I can't tell it all to you here. The long and the short of it is, though, Kasey, is that one summer I tasked myself with making up 2 words and working them into conversations. Okay. I spent months doing it until one day I actually got a person to use the word. And that was it. I stopped. I was just like, oh, I won. That was so
that was all I needed.
I never told them. Like, I just kept using this word in this certain context. And then one day they used it. And she's like, is that really a story for the podcast? I'm like, it might not be.
Like I started a thing.
Yeah. How about the time I flew to Albany with Stuttering John from the Howard Stern show in a private plane? No, I've never told that one. One day. Not today, Kasey, though. Not today. My God. All right. Well, I appreciate you doing this very much. It was nice of you to take the time. And you were very kind. And you let me move the time so I could go to a doctor's appointment with my wife today. And I really appreciate that, too. Thank you.
Sure, of course. No problem.
Cool. Hold on one second for me. A huge thanks to Kasey for coming on the show and sharing her story. And, of course, boo to her father, Joe, for ruining my childhood and the childhoods of everyone I knew. You're definitely going to want to check out the private Facebook group, Juicebox Podcast, Type 1 Diabetes. There's over 43,000 members, and right now there's a conversation going on that you could add to, learn from, or may just enjoy looking in on. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with someone else who you think might also enjoy it. And no matter where you're listening, even if it's not Apple Podcasts, can you please check to make sure you're subscribed or following and that your player is set up to download new episodes. Thank you so much for listening. I'll be back very soon with another episode of the Juicebox Podcast. And if you're interested in that information about BetterHelp, hold on for 1 second. BetterHelp is the world's largest therapy service and is 100% online. With BetterHelp, you can tap into a network of over 25,000 licensed and experienced therapists who can help you with a wide range of issues. BetterHelp.com/Juicebox. To get started, you just answer a few questions about your needs and preferences in therapy. That way, BetterHelp can match you with the right therapist from their network. And when you use my link, you'll save 10% on your first month of therapy. You can message your therapist at any time and schedule live sessions when it's convenient for you. Talk to them however you feel comfortable. Text, chat, phone, or video call. If your therapist isn't the right fit, for any reason at all, you can switch to a new therapist at no additional charge. And the best part for me is that with BetterHelp, you get the same professionalism and quality you expect from in-office therapy, but with a therapist who is custom picked for you. And you're going to get more scheduling flexibility and a more affordable price. BetterHelp.com/juicebox. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/juicebox. Save 10% on your first month of therapy.